It's hard to think of a Pokemon that looms over solo runs more than Alakazam. So many challengers need to outspeed it or one-shot it just to survive, and after about 1,000 of you voted, 38% of you think that it's time to see how fast Alakazam can beat Pokemon Red. Alakazam is one of those Pokemon that's just built for solo runs. It has the psychic typing, it's got fast experience gain with a medium slow growth rate, and if you look at the stats, it's exactly what you want. 135 special, 120 speed. It's pure offense, and usually that's all that you need. Starting with Confusion makes the early game easy enough, and for what it's worth, Alakazam and Gyarados are the two Pokemon that Game Freak decided to completely gut their starting learn sets in yellow. The world may never know why. There it only gets Kinesis and Teleport at level 1, so you're forced to use Struggle until level 16, and it sounds really bad, but I've also done the Abra run, so it's not the worst thing in the world. But as for the gameplay here and how the opening starts, it's exactly what you would expect. Bare minimum, so let's stop yapping and let's get straight to Brock. On the surface, Brock is a very simple fight. Just use Confusion until his team goes down, take the badge. But this is a prestige run, and that means that I'm going to overanalyze everything because I'm chasing a very low final time. Now, after a few attempts, I did decide that the optimal way to do this was to crit at least once, hopefully twice on Brock. Resetting here is not a big deal since it takes less than 2 minutes of real time to get back here, and with a 1 in 4 crit rate, the odds really aren't that bad. Now, in the attempt that I kept here, I crit the Geodude. I did not crit the Onix, but luckily I got a Confusion proc. It ended up hitting itself, and that gave me a pretty clean pseudo 2-shot, and that's the first badge down just like that. There's still a little bit more to say about Brock, but first, if you're new, I've been doing this for a long time, and some runs inevitably start to collect dust. Alakazam is one of them. I made a video about 40 years ago in 2021, and the last time that I touched it was a short stream back in January of 2023. So it's been about 2.5 years, and a lot has changed since then. I think that the highest praise that I can give this Pokemon is that despite all of that time and all the updates to routing and strategy, it's still holding on to a top 5 spot. That's why I'm really excited to see what I can squeeze out of it now. And if you didn't know, this is what I like to call a prestige run, where I take an older run, I completely reroute it, optimize it to modern standards, and then I make that Pokemon shiny just to kind of mark that this is going to be the locked in rating for the tier list. Now let's get back to an early lesson that you learned from Brock. I don't have direct footage of it here, but there are cases where Geodude or Onix can crit you, and since it takes like 3 turns each to knock them out, considering if you don't land a crit yourself, you can actually lose the fight. Even if the Geodude goes straight tackle and then the Onix adds in some chip damage, you'll end the fight at red health really quick. Now the point of bringing this up is that it highlights the first major flaw of Alakazam, physical fragility. I've mentioned it a lot in other videos, but when you actually play it, it somehow feels a little bit worse. Now this is a speed run, and that means that I'm not going to be healing unless I absolutely have to, and at that point the run's probably over anyway, and it just opens up the door for a lot of danger in several places. For example, on Route 3 you got a lot of quick attacks, and there are plenty more all the way down to the SSN. Anything that survives a hit can swing back, and it has a chance just to ruin your run. And if you're like me, you're chasing tight execution and you got the ultimate goal of just setting a fast time, then those small windows start to stack up and they just increase the odds of you failing. Getting back to the gameplay, not really much happens here, a lot of one-shots, but there are 3 key things about Mount Moon that are worth mentioning. First is grabbing the rare candy. Most of the top runs will skip it, but I do need it here. And then I dip down to pick up Mega Punch, which I'm going to learn immediately, and in the same menu I'm also going to learn Bide. Now these might seem a little bit out of place for a Pokemon as strong as Alakazam, but they're going to pay off very soon, and we're going to start off by just talking about Bide. This isn't a new strategy. I brought it up as recently as the Butterfree video, but if you've got the bulk to at least tank a few hits from Starmie, Bide is a great way to save some time. For Alakazam, your strongest move here is a resisted Confusion, and if you want to get into the nitty gritty with the numbers, Confusion would take about 8 hits to reach a 100% knockout chance on the Starmie. Mega Punch takes 6, but Misty often uses an X defend, and that'll push that to a 9-turn knockout. Now conventional wisdom says, hey, just delay Misty, but with really high special, you can survive bubble beams and water guns just fine, and I found this strategy to be consistent enough to go for. Your mileage, as always, might vary. Maybe the risk isn't worth it to you, but it is to me, and I think this works extremely well for a fast second badge. Rival number 2 in Pidgeotto, normally he'll have one chance to use Sand Attack, not too bad, but Alakazam does have that glorious 23% chance to crit, and you're going to see it in action a lot. You're going to see it right here, no Sand Attack today. But I think the more important aspect of this fight to go over is Mega Punch. This is not the only fight that it saves time in, but even if you only consider this fight and the Abra and the extra turns that it takes compared to a resisted confusion to knock it out, you already make up the time that it took to grab Mega Punch in the first place, so to me it's not even a question of if Mega Punch is worth it or not. Now remember, I did Misty first, so I'm likely a higher level than most of like the minimal routes, but it still takes at least 4 confusions to chew through Abra, and I have to firmly state, if you're not picking up Mega Punch on a red version Alakazam run, I think you probably need to at least look at this strategy and reevaluate some things. Now, my friends, it's that time. Now, feel free to tell me if you've heard this before, but did you know that Nugget Bridge in the Path to Bill's house contains the single highest cluster of mandatory battles in the entire game? And I'm not even trying to make a meme here. I'm not trying to do a reoccurring bit. Legitimately, this segment from Rival number 2 all the way up to that final last, it's the most back-to-back-to-back fights that you'll have to do in the entire game. Now, luckily for us, Alakazam's Confusion can one-shot every single thing on this route if you have the Misty experience. And if you're curious, if you want some numbers, there are only 20 Pokemon total if you take the faster Onyx route. And hey, would you look at that? We have exactly 21 Confusions left. Now, one of my favorite aspects of doing runs is how tightly you can plan some sections, how the puzzle pieces perfectly go together, and having just one extra confusion makes me feel really safe from something like a wacky Gen 1 miss or things of that nature. All of that is to say that Alakazam does extremely well here. I'm also going to grab the Ether at the end of the route to avoid a Poke Center trip, and just to prove that this run is sweaty, I hold off on using it immediately and I combined it with the escape rope menu. And believe it or not, we're not done with this section. The Dig Rocket Grunt to me is the second and final spot that Mega Punch is just worth it. Just on paper, if you just look at the numbers, you'll likely save at least 2 turns here with Mega Punch alone, but there's a little bit more to it than that. I talk about this trainer a lot, and to me, if you want my opinion, he's a top 3 time waster in any run in general. If you don't have a clean answer for Drowsy and you get put to sleep, it can absolutely obliterate your run. You might as well just restart. Wasting like 7 or more turns because you didn't plan for this fight can just bleed minutes of in-game time, and it feels awful just sitting there taking a nap, just waiting for it to all be over. Now, when you're using Confusion and it takes up 4 turns to finish the job, you're just playing a slot machine and you're just giving Drowsy chance after chance to land Hypnosis. And beyond that, Alakazam is very frail. We've already talked about it. If the AI puts you to sleep and starts pounding you like a crazed Bill Cosby, you'll probably die. And that's just the cold hard truth. And those are the 2 big reasons why Mega Punch was worth it to me. And it's hard to really argue against that, I think. Now let's get into some new Alakazam tech. As I approach Vermilion, you'll be perfectly fine just taking the standard path and just relying on Confusion for a little bit longer, but if you break it down, there are a few ranges that you start to miss along the way, and after finishing the Rat Junior Trainer, I do hit level 29 and I'm going to burn 2 candies to reach level 27. This gets us Psybeam, and that, along with a couple of extra levels, keeps that one-shot train rolling. And I gotta say that my overall strategy for this run was very simple. Pick up as many one-shots as possible to push out the fastest early to mid game that you can get, because things start to get a little bit dicey, a little bit rough later, and we'll see if the trade-off pays off. Down in the SSN, I'm picking up Body Slam, and I did briefly consider just keeping Mega Punch to save time, but if you really think about it, if you miss like 1 or 2 Mega Punches later, it would cost about as much time as it would take to pick this up anyway. Body Slam is more reliable, it hits harder, and most importantly, that paralysis chance does come in clutch. You definitely need this move to save significant time later, but we'll get into that when it actually matters. Outside of that, I will be skipping the Gentleman Candy, and on rival number 3, Psybeam is just incinerating everything. You do get to see the one early use of Body Slam, just like Mega Punch before it. It's just there to deal with enemy psychic types, but with that all handled, let's take a look at the 3rd badge. The previous fight and this one are where you would start missing some ranges without candies. Now with this route, there's only one range that really matters. Whether or not you crit the Raichu, you can save a turn there. And I don't here, but based on my health, you can probably tell that I wasn't that worried, and that's a complete lie. I was actually worried a lot. We'll come back to that, but we do get the badge, and there are a couple of things I would like to touch on. To stay on topic, I was really worried mostly because I was already picking up potions to heal for Misty. I didn't love it, but it was necessary. And in early versions of this route, I was also buying super potions just to stay topped off in various spots, like Lieutenant Surge, for example. It's a really safe play and there's nothing wrong with that, but once everything's kind of like fully optimized, you're comfortable with the route and you start to cut out the fluff, the result ends up being a pretty stressful run where you spend a good chunk of the game just staring at the hurt sprout on the left. As for split data, the early game strategy to save as many turns as possible is kind of paying off. We start off with a pretty much dead even split at Brock, and we're just 9 seconds behind after the third gym. I'm not going to explain the Misty split, you probably heard me say enough about that, but overall, this is a very, very positive result. Like I've already mentioned, the goal here was to dominate the early to mid game, give myself a real shot, because the late game does slow down significantly for reasons we'll eventually cover, but for now, this is a really good time to talk about Alakazam's second flaw. If you look at the learn set on the right, there's no special move coverage. Alakazam is a one-trick pony, and the one trick is spamming Psychic on everything that moves, with the rare exception of Body Slam against enemy Psychic types. And even that's not really great because Alakazam only has 50 base attack, it's pretty weak. Now the lack of moves like Thunderbolt or Ice Beam, they're not going to matter for like 99% of the game, and you're going to do just fine without them. But when you do need that coverage, it becomes very noticeable. Now we don't need to go over that just yet, but I would like you guys to remember the 2 flaws that I've covered so far, because there will be a pop quiz later, and it's for a grade, so don't act all surprised when it just pops up later. Skipping ahead to Celadon, I'll start with the item buy. Everything is short and sweet, there's no vitamins, no TMs, it's really just an in and out operation. From there, it's time for the Rocket Hideout, and things are very easy to the point to where even Confusion can pick up the majority of one-shots, and Psybeam can handle the rest outside of the Kangaskhan. There are no surprises here, but it does bring up an important point that I would like to cover. Now, when you're playing a Pokemon that gets Psychic, and it's going to play a pivotal part in the run, it feels really natural and intuitive to go pick it up for free in Saffron immediately. And I know, guys, I've mentioned the Mew video a lot, and trust me, I'm trying not to. The video has been done since mid-March, but already I've basically covered every aspect of that run in other videos already, so it's getting really tedious for me to try to keep up with the continuity. But the long and short of what I'm trying to say is that Psychic is something that you usually want to rush, and for Mew you will, but not for Alakazam. And the reasoning is the power you have now versus the time you learn the move naturally. Alakazam has this perfect level curve where Psybeam can still do everything that Psychic could do, and you can just save the little extra trip, and with little bitty tweaks and routing, you can just learn Psychic without losing anything. It's a very minor detail, and it was something that did require a deeper look into after a run or two, and this is how I decided to play things out. And you can just see from the footage, whether it be Giovanni, whether it be rival number 4, whether it be the Ghastlies in Pokemon Tower, Psybeam is just all that you need, and you'll be hard pressed. I don't think you could find a section in the entire mid game where you actually need Psychic. Next up is the Safari Zone, and it's one of the most important part of the games because it's the culmination of item planning. The protein combined with the other item choices previously fills up my bag, and this is the exact position that I want to be in. And I know I've been hounding you guys talking about full bags, trying to save on that little gym leader text, and I think you kind of get it now, but now that we have the yapping immunity from the gym leaders, let's go pick up a couple of them. Erika is example 1 of why Psybeam is just good enough. Even on Tangela, I get the one shot, I do crit, and this is pretty much as simple as it gets. Let's not really linger on it. And I do have to highlight what I would like to call a pseudo gym leader for this run. It's both Jugglers and Koga's gym. I talk about this a lot, I feel like, and in the Mewtwo video specifically, I kind of talked about where I was obsessed with getting this fight to be nothing but one-shots, and oftentimes that's a very easy mistake to make. You get kind of lost in the weeds looking at the numbers, and oftentimes the perceived solution takes you more time than it would take to simply just do the battle normally. Even though Alakazam has low base attack, Body Slam's just, it's good enough. You're not going to hit all the one-shot ranges, and I even make a slight mistake by trying to save Body Slam PP for some reason. I use a Psybeam, it doesn't knock it out. Things get kind of awkward. but the overall point I'm trying to make here is that it's fine, and we're gonna hear that a lot in this video. On average, it takes 2 turns, sometimes 3, sometimes maybe 57 turns on the Hypno, and you can see from my health at the end of this is another section where I was initially buying super potions, but I think we can immediately get into why I didn't actually need them here. And it's because I've learned Psychic naturally by this point, and Alakazam might as well be a nuclear bomb going against Koga's soft little weak to Psychic Pokemon. Just like Erika, this one is over in an instant, and now let's kind of change up the pace. That's going to lead us to Silphco, and it's the bare minimum. Fight the Arbok, get the card key, go to rival number 5, but most runs do like to do this first because there's a lot of juicy TMs here, but Alakazam avoids it because to put it simple, I just felt too weak at lower levels. I tried to use candy to get to this point, and if you're using more early candies, you end up making an already sketchy in-game feel slightly worse, so I didn't want to do that. The overall routing decision to route in extra items, fill my bags earlier, and take out the gym leaders a little bit sooner than I would have liked, it allowed me to be strong enough here without burning my finite resources. But let's take a look at rival number 5. I would describe rival number 5 as the perfect fight to give us a glimpse into a lot of late game battles. You simply just cannot one-shot a lot of things, and even on the Pidgeot, a quick attack crit does massive damage to us, but the ultimate goal here is to outpace, do the damage, survive. As you might have guessed, one of the obvious spots where coverage would be pretty great is on Execute, which may or may not be foreshadowing. And just like Koga's Psychic Gym Trainers, I do fine here. Most of the things like we're gonna see a lot of is 2 shots. I do more than enough damage. It doesn't make this necessarily a chore, but it's not exactly like, let's say, Mewtwo or even like Mega Rayquaza in terms of a toolkit available just to one-shot everything. But I think if you look at this battle, it's gonna be just the prime, put it on the bulletin board. This is the example of how fights are gonna start to feel as we get deeper into the game. And let's take a step back, let's reflect a little bit since we now have it on the learn set, and just relax as I take that brisk swim down to Cinnabar. And what's cool about this run is I'm going to do the final menuing of the entire run here. Maybe I use an elixir, just ignore that. But down in Pokemon Mansion, I do have 4 candies left. I'm going to pick up the final 2, and I'm going to make the executive decision to use all 6 of my rare candies right now. That's going to get me to level 48. It's going to free up a back spot, and it's going to allow me to pick up a secret key. And also, did you guys know that Alakazam in the Pokédex, it says, hey, I have about 5,000 IQ. Now, personally, I think you would need at least 10,000 to even begin to comprehend the complexities of if Tombstoner, brother, is actually TM28 or not, but maybe that's just me. The power spike to level 48 here is very helpful in several ways. Now I really do wish that I could have held off on some of the candies until later to maybe squeak out a little extra level, but as far as Blaine goes, the first 2 Pokemon don't really matter. We can just one-shot them and just move on with our lives. The Rapidash is where I missed the first of many ranges, but to be fair, it's only like a 45% chance to get the one-shot, so it doesn't really matter. But here is the biggest thing to justify my candy usage, and I feel like, once again, this is kind of like foreshadowing, but Arcanine is going to take down Crit Me. Now we're very frail, but thankfully I've had the experience and the foresight to use the candies, which means I actually survive at just 23 HP, and the dream is still alive. We get another badge. I decided to take a calculated risk on Sabrina. I did not heal after Blaine. I'm still very low, but I say calculated because I know I can one-shot Kadabra, and ironically, the Mr. Mime is the only thing that could take us out. Now it's a 2-shot, and Double Slap can't even do 10 damage to me, so we're safe for now. Venomoth never stood a chance. We can easily just get it out of here, and Sabrina's Alakazam will only spam Recover since it has good AI. Now Body Slam is the only answer to this solution if you want to be fast. I don't really research other people's videos, but I can just distinctly remember from my first video talking about people doing toxic strategies or using Dig for some reason, and throwing no shade being as nice as I can be, I think that's a god-awful strategy if your focus is to get a fast time. And I actually just get a crit here, make things a little bit faster, but level 48 and above does make this one not so bad. Going straight into the 8th gym, Giovanni is kind of like this rare break in the end game where I can just kind of take a step back, kind of lounge a little bit and spam one move and get mostly one shots and not really worry about anything. I'll talk about this more soon, but notice that I am hanging on to Psybeam, and it's really good for situations like this. It just lessens the load on Psychic since it only has 10 PP. And I think solely relying on Psychic would just cost you more time and more trouble than it's worth. And ultimately what it boils down to is I think getting rid of Psybeam is ultimately a pretty big mistake. And I'll try to gather my thoughts and we'll talk about it in a minute like I said. But the rundown here is that Psybeam can one-shot everything until the end. Psychic is needed for the Dawn, but I just missed the range anyway, so let's move on to rival number 6. And I want to stress this one more time. This battle and several of the last major battles, they are just a great example of where Alakazam kind of falls a little bit short. It's just not that dominant when it comes to the end game. Now I do start off with a crit, it puts a little bit of pep in my step and I can just cruise through the weaker Pokemon. And remember, this dude doesn't even have a Dawn yet, he just has a Horn. He also doesn't even have a Tor, he just has a Cute. He don't even have his eggs in order. But the point to be made here is that battles like this, they're okay, they're fine. They're not fast, and admittedly I do make 2 small mistakes. I waste a turn on Execute by swapping to Body Slam after it uses Reflect, and then I waste a turn similarly on Alakazam, and I end up surviving and winning the battle, but it's not exactly blazing fast. And in my opinion, starting from about rival number 5 onward, you really start to see some of the stuff that we talked about start to creep in. Now I got a lot to say here, and let's just kind of buckle in. First, I think we're going to look at the split data. The last time we looked, we were just 9 seconds away from the legendary Mewtwo's pace, and throughout the run, the twists and the turns, we started to lose some ground, which isn't surprising. And when the order synced back up at Giovanni, we're down by 1 minute and 44 seconds, and since I don't really need to menu that much anymore, we'll start the Elite Four down by only 1 minute and 26 seconds. Now, while I don't have supreme confidence that Alakazam could actually beat Mewtwo's time, I'm still very impressed with how close it is, and I still think that Alakazam can do something very rare and special as far as vanilla Gen 1 Pokemon go, so it's going to be kind of interesting to see how it plays out. And let's cover a couple of things. I got 2 things I want to talk about, and I want to say them here so that I don't go into like a 5-minute monologue during the Elite Four and I'm just stretching out the footage. And the first is going to be the Learn Set. I touched on Psybeam just now, and how I think it's crucial to hang on to, mainly because putting that much of a load on Psychic means that there's more item management, there's more healing, and ultimately there's more time injected into the run where Psybeam can just pick up a lot of one-shots even as late as the Elite Four. The alternative to a Learn Set like this is to use both Recover and Reflect. Now I'm not going to get into the mechanics too much of Reflect, but essentially it doubles the defense when the opponent uses a physical move. Now I said I wouldn't get into it, but I pretty much just fully explained it, but you get what I mean. It takes a frail Pokemon like Alakazam and actually gives it some added bulk to help eliminate one of those 2 major flaws we talked about. I think Reflect is the better move between the 2 defensive moves, and let me explain why I think using Recover is bad and why I think using both Recover and Reflect in the same Learn Set is even worse. And maybe a better way to phrase it would be to say why I think using both is basically saying that you've given up on the run if you get to that point. Hear me out. These are defensive moves. They are antithetical to the entire point I'm even playing the runs for. Notice I say I because I can only speak from my perspective. I don't care how anybody else does their runs. I don't care about anybody else's mindset. If I'm personally in a situation where I have to set up Reflect, and then after that I have to spam Recover a couple of times to regain control of the battle, then I'm just losing a ton of time. I would rather just take a quick reset, try to go full offense, and have a faster but riskier time, because at the end of the day, that's the ultimate goal. If I have to do a couple of extra runs, then so be it. When you have this all gas, no brakes, offensive powerhouse of a Pokemon that can almost touch fingertips with Mewtwo that is known for its defensive fragility, but you are spending half of its moveset on defensive moves, you're almost just conceding defeat. It's like putting a piece of chainmail on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter, it's still going to get folded. You are almost accepting a slower and worse overall run just to play it safe right at the very end, right when you can start to see that mountaintop. Now that's my opinion of Alakazam, and if I took a reset, so be it. Who cares? But Psybeam is the superior option, and that's going to segue us into the topic of resets. Now for my runs, I use 2 metrics that add together to give us the 0 to 100 rating that we'll see on the tier card. so that I can accurately rank these Pokemon. The first is in-game time in relation to Mewtwo, and the second is a scaling reset penalty. Now this formula has been changed and tweaked over the years, but I always, in the video descriptions, I always put an unlisted video, so if you want to know more, you can go look at it. But what's full circle about this run is that I have a clause with my resets that say, hey, the first 2 resets don't count against you. The reasoning is that RNG can be a harsh mistress, and giving yourself a 2 reset buffer to maybe allow yourself to take more risk, maybe eliminate some streaks of bad luck, or maybe just to completely eliminate that compulsive need to have 0 reset runs. And I'll be honest with you guys, it's eliminated a lot of anxiety that comes with doing these kind of speed runs. This allows me to do significantly less overall runs than what would usually be required if you're like a masochist that puts extreme restrictions on everything for no reason at all. But ultimately, this is just what works for me, and everybody needs to find their own path. I don't care what you do. And despite what some of the comments think, I never reference a specific person. I could care less what Timmy Pokemon is doing. And just in case you're somebody that needs clarification, Timmy Pokemon's not real. It's a fake person. Stop getting offended on his behalf. Now, to drag my stream of consciousness back to the point I'm trying to make, it's this. What I think is very cool is that Alakazam is actually the reason that this rule exists in the first place. As good as this Pokemon was, I just kept having unlucky resets, or even worse, having resets that you can't do anything about. And after just kind of thinking about it for a bit, the 2 free reset rule was created. And I'm gonna go on a slight tangent here, guys. I'm feeling a little bit motivated. Maybe that's the right word. But I'm gonna tell you guys, people who maybe do runs, or maybe they're inspired to do runs by various content creators, do your own thing. Don't be afraid to, if you're playing and you're like, man, I really don't like the way that feels, or I would much prefer this, try something new. Find your own rule sets. You don't get bonus points if you play by somebody's exact rule set. You know what I mean? Like, do your own thing. And that's the last thing I want to say. I think that's enough preamble. Good talk, everybody, but the time for talk is now over. I think we have a very, very good understanding of the Pokemon, and now that means we can just fade to black. And let's take a look at what the Elite Four offers. Lorelei is one of those prime example fights. You aren't even guaranteed to one-shot the Cloyster, and every single thing in this fight will at least get a chance to hit you back. Now, with that said, things go about as good as they can do, barring you getting a ton of crits, but it's kind of just slow, steady, filled with mostly 2 shots, and all you can really do is grit your teeth and just make it through it. I do get very fortunate with a lot of special drops here, but it kind of just like evens out at the end. I don't hit some ranges, and that's basically it. I'm sorry for not going more in-depth with it, but when your best play and your only play for this fight is to spam Psychic, it's kind of what it is, you know? Not really much more to say. We do make it through. Bruno is a great example of alleviating PP management here. Psybeam just puts in work, and it allows me to save a menu instance. I do swap to Psychic for the Machamp, but this fight right here is kind of like the beginning of a slight little break before things get a little dicey. Agatha is another lull in the action, and it's a surprising spot where Psybeam still has a lot of use and can save you some PP. You do need Psychic for the first and last Gengar, but Psybeam just works in the middle of the fight. The only thing of interest is that it's hard to get a one-shot on the final Gengar, but that's kind of expected, doesn't really change a whole lot. Lance honestly should have gotten an intro, but I'm a little bit lazy sometimes, and I've already said this voiceover, so it's too late now. And this is one of the main points where you're gonna wish, I would say it's the main point you wish you had some coverage, and it starts off with our old friend Gyarados. And let me talk about this for a second. Here you are put into a pickle, and this menace is basically why the 2 reset rule exists. You aren't likely to get the one shot at all, actually. You can't, it's impossible. And if it retaliates with Hyper Beam, you essentially just lose. Now if it crits, you don't even get a chance to play the game, and it doesn't even matter if you set up Reflect or not. Here are your options here. Number 1, you set up Reflect, which I don't like that much, or you can just rely on the 2-shot and give it the least amount of turns possible, which is how I end up playing it out. Now it works. I only take a Leer, but that's actually not the best case scenario, but progress is progress. From there, setting up Reflect is much more preferable on things like Dragonair, and you do have some alright ranges here, especially if you take a Leer like I did. Now I do get a lucky special drop into a Hyper Potion into a one-shot on the Aerodactyl, but here's the major problem with the fight. It's the end Dragonite. He'll only go for Slam or Hyper Beam, neither feel good, And the overarching problem is that you essentially only have a 50-50 chance of hitting the 2-shot range. Now, if you manage to be healthy like I'm here, your odds increase, but look how close I get to this 2-shot range here. It barely survives, Dragonite lives, does a Hyper Beam, and we're gonna have our first reset of the run. The second attempt, we only see a Dragon Rage, and I do like this outcome because 40 HP is not a lot, but we're just progressing like normal. Now let me reiterate that the ranges aren't the best in the world here, but I end up actually critting the first Dragonair and the Aerodactyl, and I do hit the range on the second Dragonair, which means that even though I tanked a Hyper Beam kind of early, I'm in a pretty decent position here even though I have slightly less health than last time. Now I hit another streak of luck at the end. Number one is Dragonite misses a Hyper Beam. Now I'm not 100% on the numbers here, I kind of looked, but I do think there's a pretty slim chance that I could have actually survived a non-crit Hyper Beam anyway, but we don't have to find out. But more importantly, I actually hit the 2-shot range, and it gets me through a pretty rough battle. Now I'm just gonna pause at the end here. Before we move on, I just want to say that I'm not 100% on what you would actually need to make this battle feel great. I'm not sure if that number exists, and that's mainly because of the stats and the frailty of Alakazam. It means that you're just always at risk. At level 58, it's still not the best. You gain a very, very slight 6.6% chance to one-shot the Gyarados. Not really great. There's an 82% chance on the Dragonairs. The Aerodactyl's unchanged, and then the 2-shot range on the Dragonite goes up to 86%. Now, ultimately, I wouldn't blame someone for being level 58 on this fight, but at that point, I think you're just splitting hairs, and you're going to be sacrificing some things earlier in the game, or you're going to be doing extra training to add more time to the run. And also, while I'm paused here, I do want to say one more thing real quick. Maybe you're curious like I am and you're wondering, hey, what level would you actually need to be to get the Gyarados or the Dragonite into a one-shot range? And here's the staggering answer. Level 80. Let me repeat, level 80 will give you an 86% chance to one-shot the Gyarados and a 40% chance to one-shot the Dragonite. Even at level 80, which is not even what a bottom feeder drooling on itself Pokemon would have to get to, that would still not guarantee you the one-shots. And that means that anything higher than level 58, you're still going to let Gyarados and Dragonite take an extra turn. And if you get crit, there's just nothing that you can do about it. But that's over. Let's calm down and let's just take a look at the final battle of the run. Alakazam is basically just limping to the finish line at this point, and rather than bother with Reflect, I just go straight damage on Pidgeot. It does some retaliatory damage, takes a couple of shots, but that's kind of like the par for the course on the late game. As for the mirror match against our brother, a Psychic Special Drop is your worst nightmare, and you pretty much should just go ahead and reset at that point, but it's really not that bad. I actually go straight Body Slam regardless of if it sets up Reflect, just for that crit chance. But finally on the Rhydon, this is where you want to set up Reflect. The Dawn and the Arcanine aren't too bad, but unless you crit, they will get a move off. And it's very unfortunate that the Thick Puppy goes for Leer, because that's going to introduce us to one of the main villains of the run. Now on the bright side, Executor will never go for Hypnosis. However, that just means it'll go for straight damage, and since we have our defense debuff a little bit, we're just not going to be able to last forever. Now the real problem here is that you need to use approximately 42 Psychics or 40 Body Slams to take it out. It's kind of like chopping down a tree with a butter knife, and you already know it's over when you see that full restore, but that's going to lead us to the second reset of the run. Hopping back in, we kind of already covered the fight, we know what to expect. Obviously, if you get crit or the enemy Alakazam dropping your special, it's almost assuredly a reset, but once again, I have to say that one phrase about Alakazam that I keep saying. It's fine. It's not the fastest. It's not a series of straight one-shots. I don't have a super effective answer for everything, but I just slowly progress, 2-shot by 2-shot, and by the time we make it back to the Executor, I'm pretty much in the same exact spot with one stage lowered on my defense. If we get deep into the numbers, a resisted Psychic still does more overall damage, and with the special drop chance, you can end this fight a little bit faster. And I do get a couple of special drops here, it's not really that bad. And I don't want to dwell too long here, but I did think long and hard about using Seismic Toss for this fight, but ultimately I decided against it. Once again, it's kind of like Koga's Psychic Gym Trainers, where you have to give up like 10 extra turns just to save 2 turns. But the immediate problem here is that when I finally get to the Blastoise, I'm alive, but it's not looking the best. But sometimes, guys, you just have to have faith. I let a Psychic rip, there's no crit, but I do see the special drop. out. Blastoise does me a solid by missing Blizzard, even though I do think I could have survived since I lowered its special, but it doesn't matter. One last Psychic hits the turtle, and that, my friends, is going to end the run. Alakazam finishes the run with a 1 hour, 49 minute, and 1 second time, and I do think there's potential to be a little bit faster if you just grinded this run a ton of times, but for me, I've had enough. This will give Alakazam a much deserved tier card rating of 99.11, and I'm going to make an executive decision here today. Unprecedented. I'm expanding the S tier from this point on to allow any Pokemon that can get under a 1 hour, 50 minute threshold time, because I think it's such an impressive feat. Now, like always, I can just reevaluate this later if I have to, but for now, it just feels right. At the end of the day, Alakazam is great. There's no denying that, but just like with any Pokemon, when you really start to push the limit, you start to see those flaws and you start to see the more frustrating side of things. But I think the end result being roughly 3 minutes within Mewtwo is about as good as you can hope for, and I don't really think anything can come close. There are some contenders left, but I think basically everybody expects Mewtwo to be number 1, Alakazam to be number 2. I think that's where the tier list is headed. Also, this video, it almost feels like it invalidates that unreleased Mew video I keep talking about. I thought about holding off on this video to make that video make more sense in the future, but I've already done the poll. Everybody wanted to see this run, and it's already annoying enough to wait on Mew information as it is. I got some like vague information in the comments like a little bit ago, and I don't want to let that run dictate anything else when it comes to my channel. I'm not going to move around my content too much, just waiting for somebody to make another video on their own. Now, what I'll end up having to do when I ultimately release that video is insert a post voiceover explaining a few things, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, I really don't care. If you made it this far in the video, you're a real one, and I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch my video. Special shout out to my channel members and patrons. The support means a lot, and I need to get started on Primal Groudon, and I need to get started on that 20K video, so I'll eventually do that, and I guess I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.